Did you know that you have an extremely important job that you do every day, 24 hours a day, and you didn't even know you were doing it?
Oh, okay. No. What are you talking about?
It's your responsibility, should you choose to accept it, and you already accepted it, to keep heaven alive.
It's a little scary. Wow.
I think you have the skills for it. All you have to do is keep thinking and keep doing stuff.
Okay. Well, sounds easy enough, but I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can't untangle that. Welcome everybody to the Swedenborg in Life podcast. I'm Curtis Childs, your host. Here's Dr. Jonathan Rose.
Hey, Curtis.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, today's episode is angels cannot exist if humans abandon heaven. So there's this fascinating claim that Emanuel Swedenborg, the scientist turned afterlife explorer, makes about how stuff stacks on top of other stuff. And there's heaven, and there's angels there. Everybody you love goes to heaven, but they need us to, like, they will die, or they would cease to exist if we weren't doing what we're doing here.
That is really, really astonishing. It seems rather different than the theory that we're kind of a cosmic evolutionary mistake that happened on the planet and the planet would be better off without us. I mean, this is a pretty important role for the human race that you're talking about, that there are others that we can't see who are utterly dependent on us. Yeah.
See, I'm not a mistake. You know who you are. I'm not a mistake. The picture, if you're going to say that there's heaven and earth, there's a lot of people say this, that there's like this life and you do something in it, but then there's the afterlife. And the afterlife is great because in the afterlife, I guess, so, you say if you're not good, then you go to hell. But if you're good, you go to heaven, and that's like so great. Then why are we here doing this one? Why don't we just go there? Why would God say, all right, I'm going to make one life that's like where you have to water damage in your house if it rains too much, and you have to work for sustenance, and there's natural disaster. Why this, and then there's heaven? It's the same, but it's one has to be with the other. It's just like you have to have a, you need your body, but you also need your feet. Like they don't. Not only are we dependent on heaven, but heaven's dependent on us.
This is such a strange concept. I've wrestled a little bit with the thought of, I mean, why wouldn't you just skip this part? Why go through this world? Because it's so strange to have a body that's, falls apart as you age and all that, and just it's a really weird arrangement. Why do we need to go through this when the people who come back from near-death experiences and Swedenborg say, it's amazing over there, like you have this body of light and you can move around and there's such love and such aliveness in that world. What are we doing here? And so I've thought about this sometimes as a waiting room, and I know that there's something that they say about chairs. If you're looking to buy a chair, the waiting room chairs are supposed to be like good for 15 minutes. Like you could sit in it comfortably for 15 minutes. You don't want to sit there for 3 hours, to watch a whole football game or something like that. And I thought there's a massive amount of kind of divine attention to this. If this is just a waiting room, there's a huge amount of attention to it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful, beautiful world. And there's all these people here and all this stuff going on, politics and finance and everything else in the world. And wow, that's a lot of attention to a place where you just spend some time before you go in for the reason you're here, kind of thing,
So the function of it doesn't seem to make sense, and it seems to be bizarre and arbitrary until you understand the full picture of what's going on. And if you do, then it seems like this is how everything works. The analogies we could give for why there's a physical life and physical people in the physical world, and then there's an afterlife in the spiritual world is, you have your skin and then the internal organs of the body. The skin has a certain characteristic to it, and it's exposed to the elements. It gets rougher and gets blemished and all that stuff. And if it wasn't there doing its job, the internal organs would they would die because they can't handle exposure to the elements. They can't handle microbes.
It would not be pretty.
So also plants. You got the top of a plant that's doing all this stuff, but it's got to have roots down in the ground.
True.
This is the same thing that's happening. The life that you're in right now, the physical world, is like the skin, and the heaven is the internal systems of a body that's functioning right now and needs both. Yeah, you go from this world to the next world, but somebody else is taking your place back here. There always has to be this side of things going on. And what we're going to get into here is exactly how the mechanism of that works. What you can do to make it so that you are supporting angels at the same time that you're doing your own stuff. So this is from Swedenborg. He wrote a book called The Last Judgment. This is from number 9. The connection between the heaven of angels and humankind is such that each depends on the other, and that without humankind, the heaven of angels would be like a house without a foundation. There's another analogy for you.
Okay.
This is because heaven is completed in humankind and rests on it.
It's almost seems backward in a way to say it's completed in human. You think it goes like you start here, so you wouldn't think this sort of finishes it, that this completes it. But I guess you're talking about generations rolling over here, and then there are people there, and you need to have this layer. The house with a foundation is a good one because, the house is not going to stand for long if you don't have a solid foundation. And that even gets to an analogy I have thought about when I've wrestled this, which gets away from the waiting room. But I've thought that in a way, spirit is so malleable. I've wondered whether our life in this world is like making a basement where you can decide. You can just decide, I'm going to put this room here. I'm going to have this. Okay, we'll have this. And you shape out what you want. And then you get this absolutely liquid concrete, whatever it is, and you pour it in, and then it solidifies, and then you get rid of the boards. So the boards are like your body, that you just throw those away after a while. But then you've got this basement that's permanent, something about our spirit. We need that permanence because the nature of spirit is it can be anything, it can be anywhere,
So if you're ever going through your life and you feel like this is a grind, this is drudgery, you're building the basement. You just think, I'm building the basement. So in your own soul, you're putting down the foundational qualities of who you're going to be, who your spirit is going to be. And that's why it's important. You just I got the same lesson of try to be good, try to not be bad, learn how to love. What is it to come to right thoughts? And that, it's the same thing with heaven. Is doing a lot of fancy, cool stuff up there. Everyone who's had a near-death experience is like, you travel at the speed of light. There's instant knowledge downloads. Everything there is beautiful and shiny and alive. Yeah, that's the upper floors of the house. We're down here. Nothing shameful about being in the basement, but we're doing that function. We're providing stability on which all that stuff can rest.
And it's amazing to think, because I've thought about that within the individual, that you're making a basement, then you're going to build your house. But the thought that your foundation is also, like all these foundations are helping the heavens, people who you aren't, people who used to be in this world but aren't anymore. You still need to have like a basement level for everything.
That's in the Swedenborg experience is that everything happens at different scales all the time. So what is true of the relationship between heaven and earth is true of the relationship between your own soul and your own body, which we're going to get to in a second. But let me continue that quote. Swedenborg says, "People who do not know the mysteries of heaven may believe that angels exist apart from us and that we exist apart from angels. But I can solemnly testify on the basis of all my experience of heaven and my conversations with angels that no angel or spirit exists apart from humankind, and that no human being exists apart from angels and spirits. I can testify also that the way we are joined together is mutual and reciprocal, and This leads to the prime conclusion that humankind and the heaven of angels make up a single whole and depend on each other mutually and reciprocally for their existence, which means that neither can be parted from the other. Sort of like guardian humans. Like you've got these guardian angels.
Guardian
like,
angels.
Will you help me in my thoughts? And,
guardian human. What a wild thought.
But how? Let me prime you for this. How are we connected to angels? Somebody who's not familiar with Swedenborg, there's a very integrated psychological connection between heaven and earth. Like today, thousands of times you have felt the direct influence of heaven through the way you feel and the way you think and the impulses you have. This
without any clue. I think it was so amazing, and I know you and I have talked about it occasionally in the past, that there was a moment when Swedenborg realizes that these other beings, these angels and spirits, are overhearing his private thought. He's just thinking about something like brushing his teeth or whatever it is, and they hear his thoughts and they respond to them. And all of a sudden, this sense of personal privacy that I think most of us have falls away. It's like, what? You know what I'm thinking about brushing my teeth, or whether I did it already or not, like something that mundane, you're present in those level of thoughts and feelings. So yes, by the time, in the morning, you've already had a ton of that presence in your thoughts, presence in your feelings. The contact is so intimate. And it's interesting because some people have believed that angels are far away in other galaxies or something like that. This is almost, in a way, in certain moods, it's sort of frighteningly close. It's like so intimate. Swedenborg, actually, it was hard for him to adjust the fact that he had no mental or emotional privacy anymore, because everything he thinks and feels, I see you're feeling that. So, look, how do I shut this off? It was weird, but then he got used to it and how else would we find out about that connection unless there was a human being who was awake and aware in both, I don't think you could do it just as pure angel. I don't think you could do it as pure human being. You had to sort of be between the two. It's so great to have Swedenborg to tell. I think the angels were as amazed as we are at how tight that connection is.
Yeah. So a couple of ways to explain this and show that it's pretty much how things work everywhere. We're sitting right here in this studio and we're surrounded by objects. There's this microphone, the microphone stand, the XLR cable. There's the chairs that we're in, and they're just there. Oh yeah, the chairs. How'd they get here? Well, we ordered them, and they're here. Some person working in concert with a bunch of machines made this and packed it up across the globe somewhere. I was going to say, is this made in China? I don't know, but that all comes from somewhere, and then it ends up surrounding you.
Yeah, and it was all done with some purpose in mind. Like there was somebody had a thought, and they created something. Somebody else had a thought, like, I need that, so let's do this. It's for a certain purpose.
So there's a great product that the physical world makes, which is called the human body. So you look at Swedenborg says all the laws of physics are gathered up into the human body. It knows how to interact with sound waves and light waves, and it's honed by all this evolution, and it's like this amazing thing. And that's like maybe some of the pinnacle of what the physical world can create. There's a product that the spiritual world makes, which is called consciousness. Your consciousness is made in the spiritual world, and is really, the conscious part of you is the spiritual world coming in and interfacing with the physical. So that's why when your physical body dies, it can't support life anymore, your consciousness continues, because the part of you that's hearing this right now is spiritual. It's in the spiritual world. So It's no surprise that just like physically, your body can't exist or do anything without a whole physical network. You need to be eating food, you need to be breathing air, you need to be drinking water. Spiritually, the thoughts and feelings, the conscious part of you, you're taking that in from the environment. You're taking that in from the spiritual environment. And so part of that is what the kind of angels you're surrounded by, the kind of spirits you're surrounded by, are part of the supply chain that lets you end up with that stuff. But what the fascinating thing we're learning here is that it goes both ways. That just like, I'll go back to the analogy of this microphone. Somebody is so great that made this thing. It is an incredible machine. It's an incredible machine. And let me tell you, if you put me in the woods for 200 million years, would I ever be able to make that? Like, how did you get the metal? Where does the metal, is that even metal? What is that?
How did you figure out
Acoustics?
what the electronics need, how to convert, sound pressure into electrical signals?
But also, these people could not make this if I didn't send money back to them. Not just me, but like everybody who buys one. Yeah. If we didn't send the money back, they couldn't do what they're doing. That's what it's like with heaven. That while they are, it's all like the ultimate supplier is God. That love and wisdom, which is the fundamental building blocks of everything in consciousness, comes down into the people in the afterlife, and then from that they package it in different ways, and it moves through them to us. Yeah, that's important. But if they didn't have us as a final reciprocal, as or a resting place, repository, I should say, and we weren't sort of buying that product, and also being who we are and being this outermost plane, they would wither out and die. Like, they need us and we need them, and it will be that way forever. That's why God has made it so there's different levels.
It's astonishing, and I love what you said about consciousness, because that's a big problem in science. The problem of, like, where is the consciousness?
You're welcome, scientists.
Can't find it.
I solved it.
Science is awesome. Science does amazing things.
Made this microphone
all the time.
Yeah.
But they've bumped into this problem of consciousness, and part of what I hear you saying is that the reason that's challenging is because it's on a different level. It's being received here. We all experience it. Everything, animals, plants, they all have a level of consciousness, but we can't explain it. Yeah.
It would be like,
you can't really even explain what life is or what death is. Like, they're hard to define.
It'd be like if you looked at the skin and you're like, yeah, look at those, like, veins are like, I don't know how the skin bunches up to do that. I don't know how it sort of flexes and stretches. Yeah. I don't know if you didn't understand that there's muscles and bones and tendons and things inside there.
Yeah.
So it is that's consciousness is the inner dimension meeting the outer dimension, and just like that doesn't mean the skin doesn't matter. It's all about they both matter. You need them both at the same time. Okay, so an easy way to, again, if it's hard to understand this on a big level, let's just look at it on a one-person level.
Okay.
This is how you can understand this by looking at how your own spirit and body need each other. Sure, the spirit is like if it's really, the spirit is consciousness, like we've been saying, that's very cool and very important, and that's the real you and everything. But if your body's not doing what it needs to do, it's a problem. So this is again from Last Judgment. The same holds true in each of us as individuals. Our thinking and our willing, which are spiritual, flow down into our sensations and actions, which are earthly, and are completed and take on a permanence there. Were you going to say that?
So just to say that thinking and willing are spiritual is pretty mind-boggling, because that's something that everybody experiences. I'm having a thought. I desire this. I want to do that. My goal is this. You know, we're all doing that stuff. And he's saying that's spiritual. That's not. So some people think it's neurons firing and so on, and that doesn't have nothing to do with it. But that's part of the physical responding to what's spiritual that's coming in.
I think some people could accuse us on this show of being anti-brain. Just like by listening to us talk for some time, they should say these guys are clearly against the brain. But Swedenborg loved the brain. He
loved it.
He first and foremost, I think, of anything that he was in his polymathy, super successful career, he was an anatomist, and he was constantly looking through the brain, and makes the point in his writings that if you injure the substances in the brain, absolutely how you think and feel will be changed.
Yeah.
But what he is asserting in here and everywhere else is that the process, if you get one of those scan machines on your brain and it says, look, when you're thinking about morality, or you're meditating, look how the parts of your brain change. That the change we're seeing there is not the generation of thoughts and feelings. It's not the emerging of conscious
Right.
things. It is the receiving of however the spiritual substance works that is those things. It's the brain receiving those, and as he says here, what was he talking about? He says, flow down into our sensations and actions, which are earthly and are completed. It took me a while. It took my brain a while to find that again. Are completed and take on a permanence there. So that what we're seeing is the turning of thoughts and feelings into sensations. So like experiences of the physical world, like processing the sensory information and delivering that back into consciousness. Isn't that what they call part of the hard problem of consciousness is qualia? I hope
I'm not good at Latin. So
no, I'm just saying, like, I hope this is something that's easily fact checkable. But as I understand it, qualia is think about what it's like to see the color blue.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm not talking about like the wavelengths of light. Or
are you talking about the idea that we don't necessarily see the same thing?
No, I'm just talking about, like, sure, you can talk about what blue is. You can talk about how it affects the incoming light and the pigments and whatever that. All of that you can put in a bucket, and then the other side is the feeling of seeing the color blue. That's qualia. That the experience, what it's like as a conscious being experiencing it.
There's two things that Swedenborg often talks about. One is what it is, and the other is quale, which is what is it like.
Maybe
so
that's how you're
that's interesting
qualia.
that he qualia is the plural of quale. So it's
maybe that's
and
qualia.
That's where our word quality comes from. Is the what is it likeness?
Okay, so we may be honing in on the truth here. From what I understand,
we're very close now.
I mean, like we may be literally within miles of the truth right now.
Yeah.
Like I don't know when, it could be 1,000, but that's when he talks about sensations, flowing down into our sensations and actions, flowing down into the qualia, like the light beams are coming into the eye and it's stimulating something, but the actual, like, you getting the feeling of seeing the table,
yes,
that's the spirit flowing in and creating that to the conscious experience. And then actions. So when the brain's lighting up, it's the spiritual thing under comprehending the physical and whatever processing needs to do to get it in a form that the spiritual can absorb, and then also it's turning it into actions. So it's when you're actually asking the brain to go and do the will of the spirit in the body. That the brain is 100% all through everything. We're not trying to say that, but it's not a generator. It's a receiver. It's not the boss. It's the worker.
There's a analogy that occurred to me a while ago that isn't very good, but it's like if you had
say it. It's got to be good.
A spotlight, and then somebody's smoking a cigarette or something. They blow the smoke, and so they're outside of the spotlight, so you don't see it.
Yeah.
But then they blow the smoke into the spotlight, and all of a sudden, it was already there, but when it blows into the light, you see it. That's what I think of as, it's a horrible analogy, but something from the spiritual world is, affects your brain, and your brain is lighting up. You're listening to music or something, and then your brain lights up. That's something from somewhere else. It shows up because there's a light there.
Right. Yes. We can't see it's just like oh man, how many metaphors can we mix? Okay.
I think we're going to set a new record today.
How many? So
and this will bring us closer to the truth.
The microphone
within 900 miles.
The microphone just shows up in a box. You can't. The most you can see is the truck coming and putting it in front of your house, and then it's there. You're never going to see the rest of the supply chain because you can't. If you can't, let's say you can't see it. You can't go there and see it.
Oh no.
So that what we're saying
Nobody
is
knows.
The brain lighting up is the first thing we can see in this chain of events that comes from the spiritual world.
It's like the unboxing or something. Oh, there's this there, and yet it's already a microphone by the time it it amazes me how often thoughts will pop into the mind, not always, but sometimes, like a whole thought, like, they're just blah, 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 blah,
Okay.
Well, that
Okay, sorry.
It's amazing that something will show up that way in the mind.
You saying that is getting me fired up because it's just so obviously how it happens. I was experiencing this last night.
Really?
Last night at like 9:30, like later than I should have been.
Late. That is late.
Because I was working on something and I was getting very good ideas for it. And if you've done I think one of the easiest places to see it is in creative work.
Isn't that the truth?
When you have to think
I don't know what you're saying, but I think that's really, really true.
I think it sounds pretentious just to talk about, my creative work. But I just mean you're trying to put words on the paper that will be good, that is good instead of bad.
Right.
That, it's so, you have it or you don't. And I'm not talking about different people. I'm talking about within me yesterday versus today.
A given second. It's amazed me with like songwriting, which I've done occasionally, and where you'll think of a lyric, it'll just come to mind. You've got a certain rhythm of words or something, and then you think, well, no, that's no good. And then something else will just pop into your mind. Like, where did that come from? But you say no to this one, or I like this, but not that word. Different word, please. And then, bing, something else. Just show where does that come from? It's amazing. And sometimes, I'll get just a line that shows up in my mind that already has a rhythm. It's already going somewhere.
Yeah.
It's its own thing, and then it's my job to try to think about, well, how would you pull that? Because it should be like 16 lines instead of one line. How do you get the other 15 lines? And that's still interactive. But the first one's like you're given for free. It's just like, here's a line.
So to those people who are out there and saying, I'm just kidding. None of these people that I'm about to talk about are watching this show. The people who are saying, you guys, you're just making this whole spiritual inflow thing is an unnecessary complication. There's no evidence for it.
Right.
That's not how things work. Materialist reductionism is what's happening. The mind, go ask the Beatles how they wrote their songs. I mentioned the Beatles because they're the most enduring, creative stuff of the last couple centuries, or go like
it's a pinnacle. I think,
and they have no reason to try to back us up on what we're saying here, or even support the inflow of a spiritual into a physical. Right. But I was listening to some interview or something. You know that song, there are places I'll remember all my life, consistently ranks up there as one of the favorite all-time songs of people who like the Beatles. And it's, I read an interview with John Lennon, who wrote the lyrics to that song, and he was saying, I had tried a few times to write clever lyrics and I couldn't, it wasn't going, and then I fell asleep and woke up and the whole song was there. All that stuff was there. Those songs, you'll hear Paul McCartney talking about the best songs. If we couldn't write it within 15 minutes, it wasn't. And these were like 20-year-old kids.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan, there was an interview with him saying basically this, which is, I can't write the kind of music I used to write. That's something that just, everybody who's in this knows it comes in, it flows through you. Business leader books, everybody says there's something that wants to happen through you. The mind does work like this, where it's something is coming through.
Yeah. And your job is not to generate and extrude stuff by the power of your own intellect. Your job is to be receptive, to be in a good mood. As you say, go to sleep, wrestling with your own mind. John Lennon is sitting there trying to squirt out lyrics, and there's nothing's happening. And then, bing, it's just handed to him.
Let alone,
he made the effort. That was an important piece of it. But there's also an important thing that's flowing in. And his being asleep was actually a better condition, or just waking up was a better condition for him to receive that lyric than him trying to force it with his own brain.
Let alone eureka when he was
Yep.
sitting in the bathtub. Who's that guy? It's not-
John Lennon. I think that was also John Lennon.
He's sitting at Isaac Newton or somebody. I can't remember who it
It
is.
was an ancient philosopher.
An ancient
but never
guy,
mind.
Epicurus or Hermoclides or somebody, didn't know how to measure volume, and he couldn't figure it out. And he was like, "All
Because
right,
he
I'm
was
just gonna-
asked to tell, wasn't
the
it
crown
somebody's
was
crown? Was
real.
it really gold,
We
or
did
did it
this
have
in a
some
show
other stuff
before.
in it?
My memory, but the point is, he didn't know what to do. He's like, "I'll just take a bath." I got it. So
And he goes running out,
That's
yelling,
our job.
Eureka, which is Greek for "I have found it."
Yeah.
I found it.
that's our job. To receive those things. But
Not
Evan has
just
a
you
job
and me,
as well.
but everybody, all the human race.
Oh,
That's what we're all
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
It's not just on
if
us,
people meant us,
thankfully.
they would, like, what a sad state of
We
affairs.
are in trouble.
This is what heaven looks like. Heaven comes through. Those are the guys it comes through. Like, can I get inflow
No
from somewhere else?
wonder we're in such a mess.
So thinking, willing flows through into sensations and actions, and are completed and take on a permanence there. We continue. If we did not have these later functions as well, the sensations and actions, if we lacked these sensations and actions at our outermost boundaries, the thoughts and feelings of our spirits would dissipate, like things that had no defined outlet or foundation. On this principle, when we make the transition from the earthly world to the spiritual world, which happens when we die, since we are then spirits, we no longer depend on our individual base, but on a communal base, which is humankind.
Wow.
Whoa.
So your body's cast off. It's in the grave. It's cremated or whatever. And
I didn't see
but
that.
now you're resting on the entire thing, and that's so interesting because it's interesting to try to do the thought experiment of think of what would happen to a feeling. It's so interesting to me how physical feelings are. You know, I think of them as emotions. But if you ask me, well, no, there's a tightness in my gut, or there's a feeling in my chest, or whatever it is. There's if you didn't have the flesh, how would you even know what you were going through? You know, like it needs to be anchored in this world. And I also keep thinking about that word permanence because it comes down into actions. I was just listening to a podcast that somebody recorded years ago. There's a friend of mine. I recognize his voice. There he is on this podcast. Well, it's ages ago that he recorded that.
Right.
And if he'd passed on, that voice would still be, more or less permanent. I mean, something's captured in there. And this is when we get into the sort of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit discussion and how it relates to who we are. This is kind of the Holy Spirit part of it. That your action, when something gets encapsulated in something you create or say to someone or write or whatever form it takes, something's coming down and achieves a permanence on this lowest level. It's cool. And otherwise, it's all sort of blowing in the breeze. You have a feeling, it's gone. Oh, I didn't know what that was. Oh, here comes another one. It would be difficult without that.
When we
as bad as that, it's not always fun to have flesh, to be in a flesh suit, but it would be worse without it.
It's like you can see analogies for this everywhere. It's like the different kinds of people that work at a company. That there's this assessment that you can do. There's a million assessments that will figure out what are your strengths and weaknesses.
Yes, that's right.
And I did this one that it measures like what are the things it calls them working genius, what are the things that you're really good at, what's your working competency, what's your working frustration. And it asks you a series of questions. To some people who go and do work, if you say to them, here's a vaguely defined, sort of open-ended, we know we want to get there, I don't know how to get there, can you figure out how to do it? To some people, they say, this is exactly what I want. I love that challenge. I want to navigate that. I like to get sort of solutions that are not already thought of.
It's hard for me to pick a place to go, but now that you've told me exactly where we need to end up, I can figure out how to get there.
And so, to some people, that's their worst nightmare.
Awful.
It's like, no, there's no defined scope.
Just tell
there's
me
no,
what to do.
There's no defined objectives. There's
no
different kinds of people.
procedures in place. There's no playbook I can follow.
That's right. So we don't even know if we're doing it right. So if you think of heaven, if you had somebody who's in a company and they're really good at thinking of the starts of good ideas, that they think of some new product, or they'll think of some new service or direction. Those are really good, but that person just does not have the discipline or the tenacity or the organization or just the kind of mind to then just from being an idea all the way through to being a product.
Some people just start business, they're serial business starters,
Right.
But it gets boring to them after, once it's up and running. Hand it off to somebody else,
Or they can't run it competently.
They can't do it.
Like they can start it up, but it's like they say with there'll be, I don't know if this is good to bring in now, but there'll be like armed overthrows of government, where there'll be some group who's like, that's it, we're going to go and get the people out of here. But everyone says governing is very different.
Governing is very different than the overthrow.
It doesn't
process.
mean you know how to govern.
It's almost like, offense and defense, like you needed a whole new team on the field when you get to the governing part.
So I don't think we're supposed to compare that to heaven. All I'm trying to say is there's different kinds of movements in people, and if you don't have one, the other falls away. So that the spiritual world is more like the ideas generator, the moving fast, it's fluid, it's liquid. There's
the feelings and
you need a base to
values.
catch that, to make it concrete and permanent. So when we both said "whoa" at the end of that last quote, it was genuine, because I skimmed these quotes, but I didn't really see that line, didn't stick out to me. So I was surprised by it. So people might say you're just faking that, but also people could say you're just saying "whoa" like to try to make Swedenborg look good, that this is an incomprehensible psychobabble. But let's explain in detail what that means. He's saying, why is it you have to have an external physical world and existence to go along with your spiritual world? Well, within you as an individual, there's your spirit and your body. And your spirit has these feelings and thoughts, but it needs to go and turn those into sensations and actions. That's how anything becomes something and creates an impact, and so can, because of the laws of divine order, that's how it can subsist. So then you might say, well, what happens when you get rid of your physical body and die? You don't have that anchor anymore. So instead, you and everyone else who doesn't have a body, collectively, their anchor is in all of us who are still connected to the physical world and the foundation type qualities of it. So we all have our own body with our own spirit, but collectively, all the people living in the physical universe are the foundation for everyone who no longer has a physical foundation. It
suddenly answers kind of an odd little question that I've had for a while, which is that you can do a little job, a little task, clean out a gutter or get something working in your house or something like that. And it's not something that anybody will ever see. No, you don't get credit, you don't get applause, there's no, and yet there's a feeling, there can sometimes be an immense sense of satisfaction when you fix it.
Dude.
So who is that? Who care? I think it's because there's this whole thing, if it's just you in a gutter, I don't know, it matters, but sometimes the feeling is so huge. There was one time, this is a very different kind of example, but I gave a paper in Copenhagen years and years ago about Swedenborg, and 12 people came to my talk. I gave a talk to 12 people.
What was the room size?
And it was a small classroom kind of thing.
So it's not like a big...
No, it wasn't a big auditorium kind of thing. This is all breakout sessions.
I just say that knowing so well the feeling of, I have very few people in this space.
That's right.
I'm doing this thing.
That's right.
Nobody's listening.
So so 12 people are there. Yeah. And afterwards, I frankly had this enormous sense of victory, like this ridiculously oversized sense of like, that was incredible what just happened, and I think that was heaven. Like it didn't even make sense to me. I didn't expect it. I just gave a little paper about Swedenborg's analogies in True Christianity in the book, and but something huge happened there.
That's right.
You know,
If I think about like what was the best thing I ever did, right now I might say recently when we like, I guess it was a year ago now or something, we took my daughter to her first concert, and like it was a band she loved, and we had that when she was singing along with the songs, I just felt like I've really done something with my life. You know? I really do think back on that. So that
and
so
it's interesting to me that you can't hack that feeling. Like, in other words, people would love to do that, you know, and I'm at the front of the line in some other way. Like, could I just eat something or take a drug or drink something or something, you know, to have that feeling? Because I'd love to have that feeling all the time. But it's interesting, heaven kind of guards that feeling where it seems like you get it, birth of a child, or, you know, like something big happens, you know, something cool happens. And sometimes it just surprises you. You keep doing things, you do this, you do that, and then, wow, that one was good. You know, like you get some sugar for that one.
Well,
and Swedenborg says that that's actually spiritual food that you get according to the usefulness that it does.
Heaven was disproportionately excited about that as compared to the world. And I think you can see this in the life review that happens in near-death experiences. George Ritchie's book, Return from Tomorrow, which is a classic in the NDE world, one of the first ones I read.
Yeah, that's right.
Where I think I've mentioned it on this show before. He was young. He was in his 20s in the military, got some kind of serious fever, and so left his body, traveled around the barracks, and then was suddenly out in the afterlife. And he was getting shown his life review, and he was going through, and he thought, well, the things they're going to really like, once he caught on what was going on, the things they're going to like is I got my Eagle Scout at one point, so that's
nice.
A pretty big
Good
deal.
Achievement.
There was some other things, and he said that those were just like pretty much non-events, because when he got his Eagle Scout, he was really just filled up with pride about himself, but it was other little things where he was exercising a certain kind of kindness that everyone was all excited about those moments. That there's so all that is to say, you can feel coming through you some consciousnesses that have different priorities than you do, than your sort of ego has.
Yeah. And to me, it's always a good sign, like with all of these different things we're talking about, if it surprises you. Like if you tried to have a thought, a solution or something like that, and then something comes in like wow, that is really good. Like, I never thought of that. I've been trying to think about it. Some things I try to think about for years, and then something clicks and it comes in. That sort of element of surprise. Also, the element of surprise when you feel extraordinarily good about something that you didn't even think was that kind of a non-event, you know?
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, I was like, I'm on cloud nine. You know, what's up with that?
Again, there's nothing special about this conversation that we're having here in comparison to the conversations everyone else is having at home, the things people are doing at work. So we're not trying to say this is so great, but the phenomena that we're talking about is happening right now as we're doing this. Because as you were talking, I don't know if they'll show it in the edit, but when you were talking, I went like, because right then this idea hit me. And that's how this whole podcast works, is we plan out very few of the ideas, but some idea hits me of, this is a point that I hadn't thought to say, but this would fit very well at this point in the conversation. So that happened in real time, and the idea was, you might get the sense, where are you, God? You're not doing anything for me.
Yeah.
You're not, I'm down here,
very
and you're not doing anything for me.
Feeling, yeah.
What Swedenborg's doctrine of inflow does for you, when he says, guess what? That stuff you're experiencing is not coming from you, it's coming from heaven. Then you start to, you realize that God is there, and he's doing stuff for you all the time. It was just, maybe it was yesterday as well. I've had a lot of struggles with depression and stuff like that in my life, where all that is, it just means it's very hard to get your mind to stop thinking negatively. And so I know I've learned something good. I've learned from that is that I don't have power. I can't flip on and off when I'm going to be able to beat that stuff back. And so now when I am feeling good and resilient to that, I know God's here, and he wasn't there before.
You're getting
I mean,
help.
he's there, but something's coming in now. Stuff that seems so mundane. I know I have a superpower right now that I can ignore those thoughts that are coming in, that I'm excited about this other sort of thing, that I have the discipline to do that. I really, not just because I was told to, but I actually believe God is doing this for me, and I can feel like a genuine sense of gratitude.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to see a little more reality how it is.
That's very cool, because it can be so heavy. It's like a crushing, but if somebody who weighed 300 pounds jumped on your back or something like that, you would not have an easy time moving around or doing anything. And that's kind of what it's like sometimes. It's just like you can hardly get off the couch or something in certain states. And so the miracle of when you see yourself doing better with that, that you're getting help. And a big part, I think, of what Swedenborg's saying is A, to realize that comes from somewhere else, and B, to be a little grateful about it,
Yes, I don't know if this counts as veering off topic. Are we veering off topic because we keep talking?
I can never tell.
We keep talking about. We said we'd tell you about how we angels need us. We are talking right now about how we need them.
Right.
But I think what we're trying to illustrate is the psychological interconnectedness. This is the way. And we experience as our side of it, so that's going to be the easier one for us to understand. Just showing you that the two are so enmeshed. The two are. It's really the analogy you've got to stick with is they're different parts of the same body. If you can differentiate things a bit, you can talk about how there's the lungs and the heart, and they're different. But where with a microscope does one stop and the other begins? That just one kind of fades into an artery, which then fades into the other. They're all the same thing. That's how it is with consciousness, the human race and heaven, the heaven of angels. It's all one thing.
It's really striking me right now that this is, because I think a lot about what could make the world better. How do we move forward? In a certain way, it could be something almost as mundane as that we have a series of moments where heaven is rejoicing. Part of what I'm talking about is they're rejoicing more than I am. Like, I didn't think, okay, I got that board straight and I got it nailed in, and now there's a shelf for the laundry stuff or something. But but they're more excited about that in a way.
Yeah.
Because I think their whole project is, let's have order. Let's have heaven on earth. Let's get order. Swedenborg says at one point that where the Lord is present, there is order, and where there's order, the Lord is present. And so just getting a little order in a little corner of your laundry area, is not nothing. Hell wants to tell you that's nothing. It's a waste of your time. But something flows in that says, and so they're more excited about that than we are. And I realize it's partly because maybe that's how we move the whole thing forward, is a series of those moments.
That's how we create the foundation for them. And it can be things that seem inconsequential. According to Swedenborg, the ancient Israelites going and making a tabernacle that had these certain dimensions to it and these certain blueprints that they acted on to build it, that had a huge impact on heaven's ability to interface with the human race.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Great example. That's a fabulous example. Just, I need you to get this kind of stick. I need you to put curtains on here. I need you to get this. Now put some gold on the outside of that. Okay, good. This needs to be this size, and put this over here. And then heaven is like, yes, that's it. They did it.
And if you attach that board onto your house, sure, they're like, okay, that's great that he did that. But they're also excited that he's spending his time doing something useful and orderly and helpful to people. And so heaven's rejoicing about that sort of stuff, which of course would bring us to the words of Jesus Christ when he says something like, heaven rejoices more over the repentance of one sinner than over 99 who have no need of repentance. Well, the world doesn't really rejoice much about when we repent of things. The world rejoices when you make a ton of money, or when make a hit song, or when you something, or when you grab power. That's the world will celebrate you for that.
Sometimes people are even a little upset if you repent and change your ways, because like, wait, I was your buddy.
You think you're better than me?
On here? Yeah, right.
So that just shows there's two different games going on. There's what heaven's into, and then there's what the world's into.
Yeah. So true.
In the
Great
negative
examples.
sense. But there can be a good, we can lay the ground. We can also be a really important part of heaven in the world if we lay the groundwork or lay the foundation for heaven to rest on. So let's talk about that next. Hey everybody, there's a brand new content adventure starting from Off the Left Eye. You got these concepts from Swedenborg, this timeless wisdom. Can you take those principles and apply them to what's going on in the world today? Well, we tried. I got a new video out on the Curtis Childs channel. There's a link down in the description. Open that in a new tab so you keep watching this show, but then you're ready to go there. Subscribe to that channel and you'll know whenever we put a new video out. So now let's talk about how angels aren't born, they're made.
Oh.
And you wouldn't have any angels if you didn't have people doing the first step toward becoming an angel here in this world. The world is the seedbed of heaven.
Quite a mind blower.
This is from Last Judgment 10. Humankind is the seedbed of heaven. That's what I just said.
Yeah. Wow.
Just as heaven has been formed from humankind thus far, that is, since the beginning of creation, so it will continue being formed and enriched from now on. Now, it is within the realm of possibility that humankind on a given planet could perish.
Okay. Yep.
Now,
yep.
What do you, according to Swedenborg, what makes it so that humankind on a given planet could perish? I know a lot of people would think nuclear war,
it's pollution,
degradation of the biosphere.
Right.
What is it that causes humankind to perish? According to Swedenborg, this occurs if humankind completely separates itself from the divine. So the reason why Jesus had to come to earth, people had gotten so depraved that they were almost doing that. They were almost fully separated.
On the verge, yeah.
But even if humankind were to perish on one planet by separating itself from the divine, an outcome the Lord provides against, it would still continue on others.
Important clause in there.
Yeah.
This is not like you can just accidentally stumble into destroying the planet.
Yeah. And
there is a mechanism in place.
One of the more whoa-sounding ideas from Swedenborg, which we just did a whole show about, is that there's other planets full of people, and they too go to heaven. You go to heaven, you go to the afterlife, you meet people who didn't grow up on Earth. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's right. He says it's just very widely known in that other world.
So why start here? Why not just go right to heaven? If the point is the seedbed of heaven, why not to go right to heaven? Right. So we have to build here the basis for the kind of mind that can go live in heaven. With the basis for the angelic mind has to happen here. This is from Secrets of Heaven. He says, this is how you build your angelic mind. This is how you be the right foundation for heaven, and how you equip yourself with the divine influence to go and be an angel after you die. You ready? Mm-hmm. We advance step by step from shallow to deep. As for instance, from knowledge to concepts truly understood. The shallower traits then serve as a foundation for something deeper.
Yeah, so that almost sounds like there's multiple foundations, almost like that egg thing that we've talked about sometimes, where each thing is an egg stage for something else that's going to hatch out of it, but that you get that foundation, and then it does seem like knowledge aggregates that way, doesn't it?
Again,
like if you're learning to play a musical instrument, first of all, you just got to learn the absolutely basic, like, oh, I hit this and it made a noise. And then you start to learn about the structure of music. And then more and more, it aggregates. But it's all that first bit of just like, this is how you make a noise, is still the foundation for the whole structure.
There's a non-zero chance, again, that everything we've said in this conversation is wrong. So I'm not trying to say this is so great.
That's right.
However, let's say that some of it is right. Most of the things we've been talking about, where we're trying to peer into understanding these very meaningful but mysterious and lofty Swedenborg concepts, we're constantly using our earthly knowledge to try to understand them.
Exactly.
So we're sitting here talking about the inflow of heaven into earth by talking about, we mentioned how the microphone works, how the skin and the muscles and the bones work. It's all tangible stuff that we believe to understand from our lives that allows us to try to peek over that next fence at the spiritual things that we don't observe as readily directly. So that's happening in real time here.
That's actually happening during our show.
Continuing on, or going to a different part of Secrets of Heaven that's actually a little earlier. From infancy to adolescence, we are purely, so there's the process of development. From infancy to adolescence, we are purely sensory beings. We take in only earthly, bodily, and worldly information through our physical senses, and this information forms the basis of our thoughts and ideas. Okay? The connection with our inner self is not yet open, beyond the minimum needed for grasping and retaining information.
Because that's where grasping comes from. That's
Yes.
where comprehension comes. So for when a child sort of gets something, and you understand something you didn't understand before, that's coming, but still that inner self is not so developed yet, because that's part of the reason for the waiting room, right? That you're not just sort of waiting for your doctor's appointment. There's something that happens here that's essential to your development that can't happen there.
Yeah.
It just does go from the bottom up. That's how it works.
It takes 9 months just to get ready to be born. Just get to it. Just, okay, go for it. But if you've ever been waiting for a child to get here, now they tell you, oh, it's 1 week in, your baby is the size of a poppy seed, and it's something. Week 2, little paddle-like limbs, whatever.
It would be difficult to survive as a poppy seed.
Yes.
Like if you decide to skip pregnancy,
we're not trying to
just be born at a day old.
We're not trying to say the marsupial way of life is inferior to
no slight to the wombats and kangaroos.
What I'm saying is, this is how it works. This is how complicated things work, especially the things that are alive work. It's actually anything. You build a building, you have to do certain things before you do other things. It's just the way material is. And so the point I'm trying to make with the pregnancy thing is that the reason why is every single day there's important things being done that has to be done at the speed at which they're being done, that makes it so that this thing can be a living, can hold life. So that's the same thing with after we're born and the angelic life that you're starting to build. You can't just do it all right away. It's got to, again, move at the pace it needs to move at. So these very complicated, very delicate things can happen. In this case, the opening of the inner self. The innocence we have at that stage is outward, not inward, because true innocence resides in wisdom. You get there once you've lived the whole life and can choose that innocence. The Lord uses this superficial innocence to bring into order what enters through our senses. Without the inflow of innocence from the Lord at that first stage of life, a foundation would never emerge on which to build an intellect or rational mind, the true mark of a human.
Now I love that, because just having sensory experience is not enough by itself. I never thought about it. I never thought about the role of innocence. It's an amazing passage. So you're just being bombarded, and you're a little kid. This is the first time, you can see that little babies are often quite confused. What is happening? They don't know a human face from anything else yet.
Yes.
Later they get more where they look in your eyes or something, but at first it's just like, what is happening? It's just a chaotic thing. And the thought that this innocence, what a wild thing to say, is actually organizing. Because how would we know? Doesn't it seem a little bit above our pay grade to build a human being? I don't know how to do that. So how do you take this sensory experience? Okay, we'll put this here, put that there. That'll hold this support. Okay, we'll put this here, put that there, and then we can build this on top of there. Because what we're headed for is having, a teachable mind, and that, okay, so now we'll put some instruction in there, and then we'll get to the point where there's some rationality and understanding and wisdom and compassion, and other things will happen down the road.
We take it for granted that will develop.
Out of sensory experience, really, you're going to build that whole structure? Like the whole thing is founded on the sensory experience.
Without fail, you go. So my wife teaches like 4 and 5-year-old kids, and now we're getting to the point where she'll say, "Oh, you see that full-on 22-year-old grown-up walking around. I taught them when they were 4.
Yeah.
But without fail, you go talk to them now, and they have the mind of an adult. And that we just take
That's
for
right.
granted that happened. But it's incredibly complex. I love going back to the embryonic development analogy, because we're starting to be able to see the physical side of the complexity. So you can see what has to happen first is it starts with a single cell, and then it divides into 2, and then it divides into 4. And within each of those, I just say it divides. Like, it just divides.
Oh,
it divides. But
just
actually,
divides,
it has to go to anaphase, metaphase, telophase, whatever the other phase is, where the chromosomes line up in the middle, and these little microtubules go and latch onto them, and then pull it apart, and there's all this replication, and get the lipid there's just in those, just to divide those cells, you couldn't do that.
I know people who do nothing but study that, like what happens in embryos. They're PhD researchers, and they're just looking at what happens in there when that divides.
And they still couldn't, if you gave them some tiny little chopsticks or something to try to do that, they couldn't do it manually.
No.
So the development of the mind, which seems kind of wishy-washy, is exponentially more complex. And it is something that God is pulling these strings on, just as he does in the development through the order he's created of the embryo. That all has to happen, and you just like you need the womb environment in order for the fetus to develop. You need the physical world. You need us living in the physical world in order for the mind, the spirit to develop. That's what it's showing the process of here.
And the astounding thing is that there's a certain embryonic development that you can describe. I'm sure with your wife teaching that age kids, there's a thing about their artistic development. They draw this or they draw that, and there's a certain sequence.
Can you grip
that they
a
go
pencil?
Through.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, they're all becoming different individuals, and that mind that's being built is more and more unique. Something's being constructed that's different than any other edifice that was ever constructed before or will
from
be
eternity
ever.
To eternity, right?
So that's you're talking about divine work there. That's not something that we can. Teachers help and parents and all that other stuff, but it's like something is going on here that's way beyond our understanding.
Here's how you start to build that mind. From adolescence to early adulthood, a line of communication with our inner earthly plane is opened up. How is it opened up? By lessons in decency, civility, and integrity, learned both from our parents and teachers and from our own studies.
Huh. That's
So
interesting. These
not
sort
just-
of moral feeling.
Not just anything opens that up.
It's not talking about math or something. It's
Regrouping.
It's being a decent person to others, right?
Continuing on, throughout early adulthood, a line of contact between our earthly and rational planes is opened up by learning what is true and good in public and private life, and most of all, in spiritual life, from hearing and reading the Word. So far as we then steep ourselves in goodness through truth, that is, so far as we act on the truth that we learn. Actually, spiritual ideas, which we would say, what's the difference between a spiritual idea like a theology, it's all just angels dancing on the head of the pin, it's just made up, it's not a hard science.
Right.
Those ideas are like some desperately needed enzyme in the creation of the mind. You've got it, or it's like some kind of nutrient that you can't manufacture, vitamin D, you got to get it from the sun or something.
Right.
Or from your diet. It goes on. So far as that we act on the truth we learn, our rational level opens up. So far as we do not steep ourselves in goodness through truth, so far as we fail to act on the truth, our rational level does not open up. So it starts to become voluntary. Like, are you going to grow or are you not?
And it's not as if we really even have much of a clue what our earthly level, like, again, we're not doing this to ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't even understand what that is. But he's talking about multi-layered development that takes a long time. It takes a long time to cook a good human being, to prepare.
So you this is talking about the development of an angelic mind. This is not talking about the development of a smart person. You can, according to Swedenborg, you can advance quite far. You could be renowned for your learning, but still be stuck at a stunted growth in terms of your moral development and your spiritual development.
You may be an amazing member of the debate society, and yet Swedenborg would not accuse you of having any rationality at all if you're not a decent, loving, compassionate person. And because that's what's rational to him.
That's what because that's the wise. Yeah, that's the point of life.
Yeah,
is to be that. And if you've missed that boat, nobody can say you've got it figured out. Even if you can recall facts like crazy, or you can out-talk somebody.
And he says some things, doesn't he? That even all that learning just increases your insanity, or just can make you a worse person, like more obnoxious.
Well, because that's how Swedenborg was. He's taken little shots at his former life.
That's right.
Where he had quite a great deal of worldly learning and
he was
awards.
A hot shot with all, right.
But yet, he lacked the fundamental understanding of that what is good is to love being useful, and what is evil is to love your own eminence and pride.
Right.
He hadn't got that memo, but I mean, he had it to some extent, but it really became real for him.
Yeah.
In his early 50s. Okay, I don't think I read this. Our thoughts stay on the earthly level in our memory, and therefore on the threshold outside the house, so to speak, if we don't take this leap. At that stage in the next, so far as we undermine, deny, and violate goodness and truth, believing what is false and doing what is evil instead, our rational level shuts down, as does our inner earthly level. In the Lord's divine providence, we keep enough contact with the higher levels that we can still grasp what is good and true and understand it a little, but we cannot adopt it as our own unless we repent belatedly and then spend a long time wrestling with falsity and evil.
A long time.
Yeah. I think that's what I did. I think that's the route that I took.
Yeah.
We cannot adopt it. Yeah. So everyone has this to a certain extent, that there's a fork in the road where initially you just grow, your mind just grows. It grows to get to be somebody who can think and recall information and starts to develop the ability to reason. But whether we make it to the next spiritual stage, which is symbolized by the first day of creation in the story of Genesis in the Bible, we have to choose that. We can sit there for a very long time, before there's let there be light happening in our life. But it's never too. The flip side of that is never too late to start that.
Yeah.
The opposite happens in people who let themselves be reborn, though. Their rational plane gradually opens up, step by step. Their inner earthly plane comes under its control, and their outer earthly plane comes under the control of their inner earthly plane. The main period during which this happens is in early and full adulthood, then progressively to the end of their life, and afterward in heaven to eternity.
I get almost a military sense of hierarchy, of like when it's upside down, the wrong thing is in charge, and that's messing everything up on lower levels. And when he says, this is in charge of, the rational is in charge of this inner earthly level is in charge of the outer earthly level. Now you're starting to get everything in the right order. You're getting an order in yourself. But amazing that he says that can happen in young adulthood, didn't it? It's like youth or something.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have to be, I'm a late bloomer, but it's possible to,
you're like,
to do this.
Was it Billy Madison, where Adam Sandler has to go back? He's going through elementary school and it's an adult. We'll get there. So the process for which we were born is to develop from being like nothing all the way up into becoming an angel and continuing to develop into angelhood forever. The way that the process is meant to unfold is you go through and you're sort of on rails in the beginning, everyone has a childhood that equips them for the next phase. You have an adolescence. But then at a certain point, when you start to become master of your own mind, the way you take the next step is just to start to pursue and live by the truth, and use that truth to do things that are good.
Yeah, that's right. And I like the way he put it. I don't remember every word, but it said, "Let yourself be something. Let yourself be reborn." People who
the opposite happens in people who let themselves be reborn.
Let themselves be reborn. Yeah. So it's not like they rebirthed themselves. They signed the piece of paper. They said, okay, they signed the consent form. It says, okay, I will go through this process, because they don't know what's happening in the process. Swedenborg talks about that a lot. They don't sit around thinking, oh, I think my inner earthly self just took control over my outer earthly.
Right,
no,
right.
we're just lost in what's going on. I don't know. I'm having thoughts. I'm having feelings. I don't know what's going on, any more than a little baby who needs changing, understands what's going on at that moment. They're just sort of unhappy and everything, and then they feel better but let yourself. But there is a decision in there to let this process happen. And I also think, from the way Swedenborg describes the days of creation that you brought up a little bit ago, that you can also opt out at various points. You can say, okay, that's enough. We got to here, but I don't want any more. This is getting to be a bit much for me. And other people like, no, I want to go the full process.
It's like if you have a retirement account and you don't know, what do I do? How do I do this? And if you want to get someone in there to help you, you have to sign something that says, I allow this person
That's right.
to mess around with the money that I'm trying to save up for retirement.
Yeah.
Even if, of course I want them to, you still have, if you don't sign that, they can't do it. So it is with God. Can I manage your assets for
That's
you?
right.
Yes, you can.
And then you get that confirming email that says, if this was you don't need to do anything. I'm just alerting you that someone just gave permission for this to happen.
And it can sound like we're sort of dividing it into, there's people who start to develop spiritually, and then there's the people who don't. We who started to develop spiritually, we bootstrapped ourselves, but the way that the equation comes out is, nobody is, all the credit is to the divine in any of it. So it's not like, even though you can appear like you're putting the effort in, there's no tier system of like who's better, who's worse. It's just God can do awesome things, you know?
And we scarcely know where we are in the process, if at all, and we have no idea what's going on with other people.
Yeah.
We have no access. So it's not about a judgment thing.
Everybody's surprised.
Yeah.
At one point, Swedenborg says.
That's right.
It could be, 100 years from now when I'm, at a ripe old age and I go to the afterlife, and I could feel like, well, look, I talked about so much spiritual stuff. My job, was like talking about this, and like I'm talking about this other thing, reading things that are spiritual. Look at me, I must have a very advanced soul, and I'm doing great. I get there and be like, come on, man, like. That look at this. You're being selfish here. You're doing that. I've got a lot more to learn than I realized. Yeah. And some people who think I struggled with these issues all my life, I'm pretty much a nobody. I don't know if turns out actually you're doing very well spiritually. You never know. Everybody's surprised. You never know.
That's right. So I remember a story about. I think this came out of the Jewish tradition that said that they ask you when you die, did you love others as you were supposed to? And the person said, no, I didn't. And they said, did you love God and as you were supposed to? No. And then the angel says, well, welcome. You're the first honest person I've seen for quite a while.
You actually get some points for that.
That's good. You get points for honesty. Yeah.
All right. So then for the last section, let's look at why we made the claim at the beginning. Angels can't exist, and we zoom in here to angels can't think without us. Like the minds
we have not covered that
people
yet.
In the afterlife couldn't function unless we were how we are. And our thoughts are essential for heaven to be able to function the way it functions.
That's a wild assertion.
So I say you're doing a job that you don't realize just by being you and just keep on going on building the basement. It's making it so heaven, it's possible for like the heaven of angels to exist. This is from Swedenborg's Last Judgment, number 9. The heaven of angels cannot be separated from humankind, or humankind from the heaven of angels. Therefore, the Lord has provided that each does work that is of benefit to the other.
Oh.
The heaven of angels to humankind, and humankind to the heaven of angels. That is why, even though the dwelling places of angels are in heaven and appear to be at a remove from the dwellings where we live, the angels are still right with us, in our feelings for what is good and what is true. That is the intent of the Lord's words, "Those who love me will keep my word, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make a home with them." So if you're doing the kinds of things that God, who love itself, wants you to do, angels can move in with you.
That is such a concept that it's not just temporary. It's easier for me to, for some reason, to think that, oh, you're in a particularly good mood, then an angel could be with you at that moment or something like that. Now, Swedenborg says they're always with us. But the idea that they actually live, like you are their house. He said, yes, they have dwellings in the spiritual world, all that sort of stuff. But in another sense, you're where they live. They're
Right.
living there.
He goes on, what is said of the Father and the Lord in this verse also includes heaven, because it's God saying, we'll move in with you.
And we, there's a plural in there or something.
Sure,
Yeah.
because wherever the Lord is, heaven is there. In heaven, all feelings about things that are good and true extend outward. So people there who share similar feelings communicate with one another and are connected. And since our consciousness is spiritual, so we have our spirit actually inhabits the spiritual world right now, we too connect through these positive feelings.
And this is not a time and space thing. I mean, this is just immediate. They're present.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just any old feelings. It was particular, like if you love goodness or you love truth, things like that. That's
Love me and keep my
words,
word. Love
right?
me and keep my word. Yep.
Yeah.
Not all human actions and emotions and intentions have the same utility for providing that home for angels.
Might be an outbuilding.
Yeah. You can be in a mode of life where it's not angels don't love you, don't care about you. It's not that God is constantly there trying to influence your life toward the better, but they can't live in those kind of feelings and thoughts. So it doesn't. And if everybody had super selfish and violent and terrible urges and lives, there would be nowhere for angels to live.
That's where it would be cut off asunder.
And that's when life, according to Swedenborg, on the whole planet would be wiped out.
Yeah, and this is a little dark, but I think how that might happen is that there would be no restraint on people just going after each other. I think people might just kill each other until you're the last two people left or something,
And be incapable of building any kind of society. I don't know if it's consciousness itself or breaks down. Whatever it is, let's not do that.
Let's not explore it.
Let's bring the heaven in.
I have wasted idle hours thinking about how that might go. But
So then it talks about how the actions and the thoughts that we have in this world, which can seem like they don't have much of an impact sometimes beyond just your own head and your little life, they make a small ripple. Actually, those things provide the base materials for angels to be able to receive their deep thoughts that they get, and it lets them receive what God is sending to them and pass it on through. Like they have to be, if you look at like a circuit with batteries, but the nodes have to be connected for the electricity to flow through. It's like that. We have to, if we create something that can receive on our end, then the angels are part of this conduit that pulls the Lord's good stuff into us.
And we have some relatively small thought or feeling, and they're getting something huge, like something great is
Yes.
happening in them.
Well, in continuing this time in Secrets of Heaven, thoughts in our minds serve to spark angels' spiritual thoughts. The images in us that serve this way come mainly from the Word, because all the individual elements of Scripture represent something, and each and every word symbolizes something. Angels notice immediately that these images come from the Word, because they contain spiritual and heavenly messages that come one after another in their proper, most perfectly arranged order.
They can tell. Like a lot of people in this world, I think if you said, me included, say, is this a line from the Bible? And then quote some obscure little piece. Like you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But there you can tell. You can tell because of what happens with the thoughts. And so that does, first of all, that's amazing what that says about the Bible. And it also makes it important that we, I think Swedenborg says in other passages that it's important as well how we're holding it. In other words, if we have a head full of wrong ideas about what the Bible is or what it says or who God is or the whole deal, that's not helpful. It's helpful if we're more aligned with the way that angels think of it, which is really, in a way, you could say Swedenborg's whole project is to try to get us thinking about the Bible, thinking about life, thinking about God, thinking about life after death in the ways that angels do. That's just called Secrets of Heaven, right? And things like that if we're thinking that way, then when we read Scripture, some little piece about what happened in what order, pow, they get a lot out of it.
It's like a callback. It's a comedy routine, and you start a joke near the beginning, and you go on it for a while, then you leave it, and you do a bunch of other jokes. But near your last joke or your second to last joke, you make the joke, and then you reference something from the first joke. Everybody's like, "That's so clever! Oh, you had a plan this whole time." Swedenborg is all callbacks. So we're sitting here starting to do a show about how there's a spiritual world and a physical world, and the two effortlessly need, or not effortlessly, interdependently need each other to interact. And we talk about how that's like the skin and muscles and organs in a body and all that. That's what we're talking about, the spiritual interface between the mind of the world of spirits and how it works according to its own order and its own laws versus the physical and how that works. We're not talking about the Bible, but yet here comes Swedenborg's main thrust of his writings about how the whole Bible is written in symbolic language, and it just it's a callback, ties right in here without even trying, which is to say the reason why God gave a divine revelation that is in this symbolic, correspondential, weird storytelling mode is because what happens is those particular seemingly simplistic, bizarre stories, those provide the it's like a code. It's like if you say fox a whiskey tango foxtrot, and no, it doesn't make any sense to somebody except the people on the other end know, oh, that means this, and then they can kick into action. In us, when we think about Moses parts the Red Sea, okay, there's some water and the guys, and they go through. Heaven just can take that, and there's an explosion of creativity. I know we mentioned the Beatles already once, but you know that song "Let It Be." Let It Be.
It's not nearly enough. Let's do some more.
Their song "Let It Be," and the songs, that's what Mary says, and he said, "Mother Mary comes to me," which is the name of Paul McCartney's mom, but also famously, Mary, the mother of Jesus, says, "Let it be to me according to your word."
That's right.
And I think of that song as like this explosion of the meaning in there, about let it. So I'm just saying, there's way more than that packed into every bit of this. This is why there's this order where you guys read these little stories. Maybe you get some of it. Really, the audience is heaven in a lot of ways.
And what I'm getting out of this episode and out of that quote in particular is the implication is that they can't do it without us. Like what happened, like the trigger, the spark, it said in there in one of those passages, didn't it? Is us reading. Like there's an image
Yep.
in our minds. That's pow. Oh, and now they see. If we hadn't read it, they're not seeing that.
If you go with the analogy again of somebody who's trying to create something, they're trying to think of a song, or they're trying to get inspiration for some kind of great work of art. The inspiration, what they'll go and do is go walk around and look at things, and something has to spark something in them.
That's right.
And it may be that they see some little interaction of nature, or something that by itself nobody would take and frame and put on a wall and auction off for $20 million. But something about that artist needed that in their mind in order to turn into that. So it's like we, with our little thoughts and our little reading of our crude version of the revelation, that sparks this amazing inspiration in heaven, which they can do so much more than we can, but they couldn't do it without us. Continuing on in Divine Love and Wisdom, 279. The angels who are with us are aware in detail of the actions of our minds within our deeds. Every one of the
actions of our mind. What interesting phrasing. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
right.
The actions of our minds within our deeds. Because as Swedenborg is fond of pointing out, you could get 100 people all doing the same thing, but they're doing it for 100 different reasons. Who they are inside that deed is different. And angels will even say that for some people, he uses the example of people sitting around having a drink and telling dirty jokes and stuff like that. And angels will say, that person's fine. Their heart's in a good place. Like they don't, no problem. This guy's, he's in trouble. The reason he said that, what he's thinking and feeling, not good.
Right.
Same thing, same joke, kind of thing.
In same action, he at one point Swedenborg gives the comparison. If there could be somebody who, he talks about this in terms of the Christian church, but somebody who went out and persecuted the whole Christian church and tried to destroy it and wipe it off the face of the earth, but they were doing it from a good motive. Like they really thought this is the right thing to do. They'd go to heaven just fine. And somebody who went and spread the gospel and did all kinds of things to advance the knowledge of the importance of Jesus Christ and the spread of the word, but we're doing it for selfish reasons, of love of dominion, love of renown, they could be in a state of hell. The actions, this is why you can't make spiritual judgments.
You can't make judgment.
You can make civil judgments, which are
Right.
approximate
Right.
calls you have to make where you say this person seems dangerous, so we've got to put some limitations on their movement or
Right.
something, because we can't tell and we don't know if they're going to do it again. You can do that, but you can never know. You can never say, I know that you're evil.
I know.
Or I know that you're good.
Yeah.
You
can't,
don't know. Yeah.
Such a simple thing. You can't say that.
I can say
you don't know that.
I can say we're going to have to. We think we have to incarcerate you because you seem like you're a we think you did this act.
Yeah.
And we think you did it, or even if you did it and it was, you feel terrible about it now. I saw a little clip of a guy who had he was drunk driving and killed someone. And you can just see the regret and the anguish that he had done it. And your heart, even though of course that he shouldn't have done that, your heart goes out to the family who lost it, but you can't also help your heart going out to him, that he wasn't himself when he did it. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have to go to jail for that, but it's a different thing than somebody who has killed someone and knew they were doing it and didn't care. Even somebody else who was drunk driving but doesn't really have remorse about it, doesn't really want to change their ways. Even though the civil penalty may need to be the same, it's a different spiritual situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Very important principle.
Every one of the acts or deeds of a spiritual person is like a delicious, nourishing, and beautiful fruit to angels. A fruit that yields flavor, nourishment, and pleasure when it is sliced and eaten.
Okay, so you just took the whole episode to a different level right there. Because
that escalated quickly.
It did. Yeah, it did. I'm a little dizzy. Because you not only took it from the fact that there's this dependency, but somehow, being kind of I like fruit, I like eating fruit. That analogy got to me. It's not just like if we're not doing those things, they don't eat eating that piece of fruit. In a sense, it said it was like that, but it's like it's sliced and eaten where they get some. It's not just like, okay, that was valuable, thank you, appreciate it, but the kind of pleasure that you can get, the satisfaction, that is amazing to think about. That if we're not doing certain things, they're not getting that piece of fruit.
We're like the plants. We are like the plants. If you talk about fruit, here's the human race, and we can eat a lot of fruit, except the plant's got to grow it. And if something happens where the plants aren't producing fruit, there's a drought or there's a disease.
Doesn't matter how much you love it. If you can't convince a plant to produce that fruit for you, you're not getting fruit.
So the angels, we're like the plants to them. The lives that we live here, the relatively stiff and static and immobile lives, if that leads to us down here producing these good actions and doing love on this plane where it's hard to do it, that's like the crop for the year to the angels.
And I get in a different way how that keeps them alive. So we couldn't live without plants. They can't live without us.
Isn't Jesus constantly saying, bear fruit?
He does say that a lot.
Go bear fruit.
He likens us to branches, and he's a vine, and bear fruit. And
like a tree is known by its fruit. Everyone tree who doesn't produce good fruit. I mean, man.
He said, I don't know how I missed it. He does say that a lot. It does seem like we're the plants in this whole this multi-universal ecosystem here.
Last thought for today. The earth is like this seedbed for angels, for the angelic mind.
Seedbed is kind of a planting analogy too, if I'm not mistaken.
Something. See, I feel like seeds and planting, for some reason, they're associated.
There's something. I don't get it. I don't fully get it.
So we need the support of the angels, and they need our support too. This is from Last Judgment 20. The divine design never stops halfway down and forms something that has no outermost aspect. Such a thing would not be in a full or complete state. No, it goes on until it reaches what is outermost. When it comes to its outermost point, it takes on a form there, uses substances that are gathered there to make itself whole, and becomes productive, which is accomplished by various forms of procreation. That is why the seedbed of heaven is on the outermost level. Meaning we're the outermost level for heaven.
Okay. Not just a waiting room. Yeah, this
is the nursery.
This is where it has to come all the way down. For some reason during this show, I've repeatedly had this mental image of, I think it's the Avatar films. I think it comes up in a lot of different films where you have worlds, all these, objects where people are living on these things that aren't on the earth at all. They're just floating in the air, right?
Avatar, you're talking about like the blue guys from the computer blue guys?
Yeah, right. Or you're diving on this creature and you're flying around and all this stuff and you're in this dizzying world. It's cool, but it bothers a certain part of me because it's like you can't have like 9,000 tons of stuff in like in midair. Like, is that more attractive? Is that nice? There's something about terra firma, just, being right down here in the ground. And it's making me think also about something more important even than those films, that in the New Testament, the Lord says about people who build their house on the sand as opposed to building it on a rock. It's a foundation metaphor, right?
Yeah.
And that if we are just sand, that whole thing's going to wash away, and great will be the fall of it, But if we're solid down here, if we're something that heaven can sit on, we're good. Everybody's good then.
Dude, fields in I'm thinking about fields in a way I never have before. That they are a picture of the human race and how the human race can feed heaven. It's also a picture of yourself, because everything scales down. So this is the parts of you that can produce the things of heaven, the good things the Lord plants in you that grow. All throughout the Bible, there's constantly fields being mentioned. Constantly. In the parables of Jesus, there are fields in sowing being mentioned. And this is why. It's because it's talking about this dynamic.
There's all these laws in the Old Testament about fields and what happens if you burn somebody else's field. And,
Man, it's beautiful the way that it all comes together. It makes sense of, it's like a mystery novel where there's this piece and then this piece and then this piece, and how do they tie together? What is it emerges? I feel like with Swedenborg, you got this piece of, there's the Bible, which is, a lot of people get a lot of inspiration, but it's bizarre. There's a lot of bizarreness.
It's odd.
Why are you telling me the story about, or why are you giving me a law about what to do to someone else's field here in 2025?
Right.
And what's this with people go and see the afterlife, but there's this world too, and why don't we just go there? Why,
such a beautiful world there.
If my friend just died and went to heaven, why are we sticking around here? You have a near-death experience. Why don't I just go up there and do it? But then these things all converge. And it's like, oh, that's I never saw that coming. What a twist! But then all of a sudden it makes sense. And then there's a rational framework by which you can see, this does look like there's a divine system here, that there's obvious divine intelligence on display in the way that the world functions. It's rational, it's ethical, it's fair. I'm back on board.
Yeah, and one final thought from me is just that saying that only the good die young. This idea that maybe the moment you hit a certain spiritual development, you're harvested at that point. No, it wouldn't work that way. First of all, it's an insult to everybody who lives past a certain age. And you need to have good people. You desperately need to have good. Don't harvest them all. You need them here. Let that grow up, as Jesus says about another field analogy. Just let that grow up.
Okay, so everybody out there watching, thanks for watching. You're doing a good job keeping heaven alive.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks for doing that.
Appreciate On behalf of a lot of angels. Keep
yeah.
You do you.
You do you. You do you. If you're not a member of this channel already, click the join button if you want to support the not-for-profit Swedenborg Foundation that makes this content. We're about to go and record our members-only video, so we're going to discuss this a little further. You can jump in there. Jonathan, thanks for sharing the fruit.
Thanks,
that
Curtis.
You got.
That was tasty.
Everybody, take it easy.